This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Welcome to the podcast. In this podcast episode, I talk with Kimberly Gerber about cultivating a high-performing team culture. Kimberly Gerber, welcome to the conversation today.
Oh, thank you so much, John. I'm happy to be here.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Irvine, California. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about cultivating a high-performing team culture. I love the idea of cultivation generally. I love high performance. I love teams. I love culture. So you combine all that together, it gets a really great conversation. I think it'll be a lot of fun. As we get started, I wanted to share Kimberly's bio with everybody. Kimberly Gerber is the founder of Accelerate, an innovative leadership development firm specializing in coaching and training executives and their teams. For 30 plus years, Kimberly has helped transform the impact of more than 1,700 leaders across industry-leading companies, including Verizon, Blizzard, UCLA, Whirlpool, and many others. The creator of several innovative leadership development programs, Kimberly helps executives create strategic vision, build strong cultures, elevate leadership presence, and finesse communication to strengthen their impact on teams and organizations. Now, I could say a whole lot more, but I'm going to pause there. Kimberly, anything you would like to highlight from your own background or personal context before we dive on in?
Sure. I think that just one thing really, and that is that before I started Accelerate and doing all of this work, that I was an executive myself. I worked in Fortune 500 companies in marketing as marketing director. And just being a student of what motivates people from a consumer perspective, it really got me. I was really intrigued about what made leaders, kind of the difference between a poor leader, a medium, like kind of a mid leader, and a great leader. And it really all came down to communication, which of course, as a marketing person is something that, is near and dear. And so a lot of the things that we teach and train and coach leaders around really comes from that perspective of how do you get people to do things? How do you get a team to come together? How do you get people to want to follow you? And it's really all through that lens of marketing and communication.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you for that background and your executive experience as well as your consulting and coaching experience is tremendous. And I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day to share your insights with me and my audience. Now, let's dive right on in to this idea of cultivating high-performing team culture. I mean, on the face of it, it sounds awesome. Like, I don't think anyone would disagree with this notion that, yes, we want to have high performance. We want to have a really healthy, dynamic culture, recognition that it doesn't just happen. Like, you have to do things to develop it, to maintain it, to sustain it. What do you mean, just as a way of framing out as we start the episode, what do you mean, by this idea of cultivating a high-performing team culture?
When I write that and say that and speak to that, what I'm talking about is when a group of people come together with a common purpose and actually can make decisions together, execute together in a way that serves not just an individual group or, line of the business, but the whole business. And to do so in a way, not where, I mean, it's awesome if there's a lot of camaraderie and everyone feels friendly towards one another, but that's not the real essence of it. It's where people feel like they're coming together to work together for common purpose, and they actually do whatever it takes. Not just the fun stuff and, not just kind of going through the checklist, but really working the business together.
Yeah, wonderful. Very good. So as we dive into this topic more in depth, what would you say would be some of those first steps in this cultivation process? Again, I guess assuming perhaps even before we start the cultivation that we have a clear understanding of what our core objectives are and
Yeah.
what high performance even means to
Yeah.
us, because I think that's an assumption that's probably a faulty assumption because many organizations don't even have that right. Like they don't understand that piece.
Yeah.
But for the sake of the conversation, let's assume for a moment that we do understand that. How do you start the process of cultivation?
I think the process starts with a charter. And I think that most leaders don't know how to do a team charter or even that they exist and that they should do one. And so that's something that we work with a lot of teams on the chartering process. And, you can do a big chartering process and you can also do an informal kind of build as you go chartering process. But the important part is to be intentional about it. So a team leader, whether they're an executive leading a high performing team with, a lot of impact, or just a new team leader, someone who maybe has, 2, 3, 4 people for the first time, taking the time to think about not just how am I going to lead the individuals on this team, but what's the remit of the team itself? What is it that we are supposed to do? What's our purpose? And then starting from there. So we have a chartering process that we use kind of just to make it easy to really make sure that as a leader, you're thinking about all the things you need to think about. You mentioned some of them already. What's the purpose of the team? Who's on the team and why are they there? What are the synergies of the team? I think a lot of times what I see when teams are kind of not functioning at an optimal, in an optimal way, is that you have a leader who may be very good at leading people, but they're leading one to one. And yeah, sure, they bring them together in a team meeting, and sure, they do some things together, but they're not actually harnessing the brain power of the team to work together to solve problems. We do a status report, everyone's individually leading their functions or their projects, but we're not working together. And I think it does take some intentionality. So the chartering process is where I always recommend people start so that the team can kind of come together, work together to figure out what their purpose is as a group, and then how they're going to work together. So it becomes a team building, but it also lays down the foundation of how we're going to do this.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm a university professor in addition to the consulting work that I do. And in my courses, I'm teaching organizational development, change management, HR, these sorts of courses. We do lots of team-based learning, applied projects, etc. And that's exactly the first thing we do. Most students don't like working in teams. Most students have had bad experiences working on group projects. And so they come with a lot of resistance. They have a lot of baggage, usually of past bad experiences. And I try to explain, like, no, you can do this well. It can be functional. It can be effective. It can be a good experience. Like you actually can come away from this, like being energized and excited about what you've done with your team. And the foundation of all of that, the very first thing I have these teams do is to put together a team charter. Exactly the points that you were talking about. Now, this isn't I'm sharing, what I do in a classroom setting in a university space. But my point is it applies in both places. It really applies anytime you get groups of people together to try to accomplish something. And
absolutely.
how often are we just not even on the same starting page? Like we're not communicating in a way that people can even hear or understand each other. So it's no wonder that teams aren't always very effective, or why they don't perform at the level they want to. You
Yeah.
have different styles, you have different approaches, personalities, you have different experiences and backgrounds, and it doesn't just
Hmm.
magically happen usually, that a team's just going to magically come together, be cohesive, and work well. You have to like
Yeah.
structure it, you have to scaffold it, and you have to put intentionality behind it so that you can make sure that you can grow together. And that's
Yeah.
what the charter provides a foundation for.
Absolutely. One of my favorite parts of doing a charter, different people call it different things, but it's the road rules process
Hmm.
because, and that is where, the group comes together and basically says, what are the behaviors, what's important to us individually, and what are the behaviors that we all agree to that we're going to, when we work with this team, we're going to abide. And some of the reasons people don't like to work together, and there's dysfunction on a team, is because we are all very different, and what we value, how we like to approach our work is going to be different. And yet, if it's not on the table, if it's not stated, people don't know. And so we run the risk of um, missing expectation, or having our
Hmm.
own expectations not met because we haven't clarified what's really important to us. So we call it road rules, where you go through and you build a short but important list of what
Yeah.
commitments you're going to make. And it's such a powerful, like, aha process for the people on the team, like, oh, this is what's important. And then as you're going through your work, you refer back to that. It's like, okay, so some things are as mundane as we're gonna be on time. We're gonna commit to be on time for things. We're gonna commit not to cancel meetings. Just the nitty gritty things of how you do the work and how you behave can be really powerful to set that stage right up front.
Yeah, I love it. And a piece of this, as you're trying to cultivate, that means, think about cultivation
Hmm.
in terms of a
Yeah.
garden, right? You're
Yep.
you're you're like literally planting the seeds. You're tilling the earth. You're
Yep.
watering. You're fertilizing. You're doing all these things, right? So that metaphor applying into the workplace or in a classroom setting where you're doing teamwork, or even at home, it means it takes work. It takes proactive effort to help
Yep.
these things be effective. Now, taking even a step back from that, I suppose we could also talk a little bit about um, the talent within the team. So how do
Hmm.
you go about identifying the needs of the team in terms of skill sets, competencies, capabilities? How do you go out and find and recruit and bring in and then nurture that talent within the team? Any thoughts on how that fits into this idea of cultivating high performing team cultures?
Sure. So as part of the process, I think it's important to understand who people are. And so very commonly used, personality, talent development tools, whether it's a MBTI or a Strengths Finders or a DISC, those are great exercises, not just for team building, because obviously they're great. You get to know one another, you get to kind of explore yourself and explore others, but they're also really powerful for helping a team see who's likely to be talented in some general areas and in some general ways. And I think that teams that are balanced, have represent many styles, are going to
Mm-hmm.
be ultimately a lot more high performing than those that might cluster a lot of people who are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Initially it can be very comfortable to hang around with, and
Yeah.
to work with people who are very similar to us, but then we're going to be missing things. So for example, you may have a group of people that, you've got some strategists on there, people who are naturally pushing the envelope, thinking big picture, figuring out kind of like, where should we go, and how to block and tackle, how to get rid of some of the obstacles. But if you don't have planners on your team, if you don't have people who are willing to get into the details on your team, execution is going to be really hard for a group like that. So when you talk about talent, like, one of the things that I always encourage leaders to do is to figure out what are the planning talents you have on your team, what are the creative and ideation talents. And then
Mm-hmm.
when people are working on projects, whether it's like a team project or even like an individual, make sure you're cross pollinating those people to be working together, even if it's just eyes on somebody else's work, just to make sure. And this is where to me, I think that the real synergy and power of teams comes together is when A team, any leader on a team or any person on a team is willing to say, I need this person over here to help me with my project because they're better at that than I am.
Mm.
There's going to be this thing missing if I don't have this other person kind of helping me with my project. And when you've got a team that's hit the high performing stage, when they come to the table and they bring people into the work that they and their groups are responsible for from across the team, or they throw things out and they say, hey, this is where we're at, we're stuck, who can help me solve this problem? Because that is risky, and it signifies that you've created a psychologically safe environment for a
Mm.
team to actually put themselves out there and say, hey, the people at this table might see something I missed, or they might be better at something than I am. And when you can do that, and when people all around the table are doing that with their work, you are going to get a better lens on the business. You're going to have better decisions, and people are going to ultimately enjoy their work a whole lot more.
Yeah, for sure. And I literally, before talking with you, was at a conflict resolution workshop,
Ah,
which was super interesting. Lots of really great things were shared. But I couldn't help, the whole time it was like, how can I proactively approach as a leader? And the whole time, and I didn't want to derail the speaker or anything to get them off of, their core points, because, they had their core objectives. But one of the thoughts I had, that was kind of underlying how I was responding to a lot of what was being shared was, what are the strategies? It's one thing for me as a leader to proactively think, okay, what are the healthy ways to approach conflict?
mm-hmm.
With emotional intelligence, creating psychological safety, doing it in a way that's going to maximize performance. It's one thing for me to recognize some of those things and to try to do them proactively, create a good dynamic for my team. But we've all been there where we've reported to people who don't get it or don't
Yeah.
understand it or don't have the skill sets or ability to do it.
Yep.
And there's a power differential. And so, you're trying to resolve conflicts within your team, but maybe you're the team member and the team lead is the one causing the problems. Any thoughts on general strategies, how we could go about tackling that?
Mm-hmm.
Because a high performing team, they're going to need to work well together. But if there is some sort of hierarchical power differential, there also has to be a way to navigate that as well.
Yeah. So um, you put a lot out there. Uh, so part of my background that I didn't mention is I'm a certified mediator, and that's something that I do. I got the certification because I found myself doing a lot of mediation with teams, and felt like that was something that was it's really important, and it's tricky
Mm-hmm.
to help people navigate when they're entrenched. And so one of the things that I learned, and it's, you think about human nature. What causes conflict is a sense of a lack of safety. An imbalance. You talked about a difference in the power, the power dynamic. When people feel heard, that's the first step. And I love the idea of granting legitimacy. And so if there's conflict on a team, now let's assume it's not with the team leader, because that's actually a lot trickier when the team leader is part of the
Mm.
conflict. So hold that off for a second. But if a team leader recognizes that there's conflict on their team, not ignoring it is the first step. Conflict rarely resolves itself, and it often needs a third party to come in and to help bring it together. Now that third party doesn't have to be a mediator. They can be another team member or the team leader, but allowing each party that is in conflict to vocalize and to authentically be heard,
Mm-hmm.
that's the building block. Like that's the first place to start with addressing team conflict. One of the things, sorry, I'm going to cough. One of the things that if I'm working with people who are in conflict, whether it's like two groups or two individuals or three individuals, is a lot of times I'll work one-on-one to hear them out, figure
Mm.
out really what's going on, and then be able to construct a conversation, a group conversation so that you can make sure that everyone's heard in the way that they need to be heard. Once you've got some dialogue going, what I love to do with people then is put them into a project together.
Mm.
Because a lot of times we get into conflict because the way we approach things or what we're valuing is different. Not worse, not better or worse, just different. And so if we can acknowledge that, see the value, grant some legitimacy, and then actually see how it works, that has been proven very powerful, a very powerful way to solve conflict on teams.
Yeah. Well, and I think of some of my own experiences with conflict,
Mm-hmm.
or where there's been some professional frustrations, or, I'm annoyed or even resentful with somebody. Typically, I am more likely to have those feelings if I don't have as much personal understanding or interaction with the person. And
Yep.
so once for whatever reason, if that is provided me, if I now have the opportunity to work more closely with this person, I still may have the things I'm concerned about, and I'm
Yeah.
still frustrated about certain things, but it also allows me to see, oh yeah, this is actually a really great person, capable in these ways. Like we can work effectively together, even if there's these other things. And just, it's like proximity to difference helps you become more comfortable with difference and
Yep.
helps you learn how to navigate it better.
Yep.
And so I know I've personally experienced that and felt that, and in some cases feel quite embarrassed by like the narratives in my head the things I was telling myself about this person, that
Yep.
really, once I got to know them better, I'm like, no, that's really not where they were coming from or what they were trying to do. And finally, I was able to kind of have my eyes open to that.
Yeah. Yes, you're spot on. I'm what happens with people, it's interesting. I was actually teaching a workshop last week, and they were, you talk about the power dynamic piece in there, and someone was saying like, well, what if someone, what do I do, how do I start the process if that person may be junior to me, if that person may be not quite at my level, but I see it, and how do we do that? And what I recommend to folks in that situation is sometimes addressing the conflict
Mm.
first isn't the way to go about it. Sometimes extending an olive branch, having a coffee, trying to build a little bit of rapport outside the situation. And that's kind of what, you triggered that memory there because of what you just said, is sometimes you just got to get to know the person, and then you can actually surface the issue that may be there. And what I find oftentimes is that people are afraid to surface what they are perceiving as frustration or conflict. They're afraid because they don't feel skilled to do it. They don't know what will happen,
Mm-hmm.
and they're afraid to make things worse. Not doing anything will almost guarantees that it'll get worse, but figuring out how to safely surface the issue, which is sometimes as simple as, I wonder if you've been thinking about this. It seems like we're coming at this problem from different angles. Do you want to talk about it?
Mm.
You know, think just taking a moment to think about how could I bring this up? How could I surface this issue in a way that was neutral to this person? And we did I had, like I said, I was doing a workshop last week, and there was a lot of things kind of bubbling up around a topic, and it just seemed like the right time to have a surfacing exercise. And so we did, and there was probably about, 25 people in the room, and we said, have a fictitious conversation, practice surfacing something. And every one of the groups was like, I actually did something real. I actually had a
Mm.
frustration and I surfaced it, and it was actually easy, and now we've actually figured it out. And I think that I bring that up because when there is conflict on a team, a lot of times it can be resolved pretty easily, a lot more easily than people feel like it could be, simply by surfacing the issue.
Yeah. And you mentioned it a few minutes ago, just doing nothing, allowing the resentments to build, the frustrations to build, passive aggressive behaviors, whatever. Like
Yeah.
just doing nothing doesn't help. It's just going
Yeah.
to make things worse in the long run. So you may think that you're avoiding, something that's going to be uncomfortable or blow things up, and maybe it will. But
Yeah.
you're better off facing it than pretending, putting your head in the sand and pretending like it's not there. And the one last thing I just wanted to say is just acknowledging that, yes, there are people that have bad intentions, nefarious intentions. There are people that, you can't just be Pollyanna-ish and just assume everyone is going to do this in good faith. But in my experience, the vast majority of people do wake up in the morning wanting to go and be good to people and work well with people and collaborate. Most people aren't, nefarious individuals trying to exploit their team or whatever. Right. So if we can just start from a place of a little bit of trust, benefit of the doubt, be a little generous with people. Because I think our human brain kind of automatically tends to jump towards, negative implications, right? And negative interpretations. So if we can be aware that that's kind of what tends to pop up, then we can challenge that. Well, Kimberly, this has been a great conversation. I know at the time and I need to let you go, but before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Well, I think the final word on the topic is trust. At the start and at the beginning, building a high-performing team and really cultivating, again, watering, nurturing, tilling, pruning, all of those. Loved the agricultural metaphor there because it's perfect for what it takes to build a high-performing team, and that starts with trust and intention. And so that's the final word on today's topic. And if you're interested, if anyone who might want to reach out and chat more about this, because there really is so much more ground to cover here.
Yes.
Our website is the letter I, Accelerate, EXCELERATE.com. That's a great place. Lots of good resources to get in touch with us, but also to download for leaders and teams, some free resources there. So encourage people to stop by and to reach out.
Wonderful. Kimberly, it's been a pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Kimberly and her team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.